Hi friends, welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm doing another what we eat in the week type video where I'm going to be showing you one meal from each day of the week that we ate as a family of 6. And I will actually have a blog post that will go along with this with all of the recipes and a shopping list if you're interested in doing this meal plan yourself. And I was wondering, do you meal plan? If you do, how do you go about it and what are some of your favourite meals to make? And the other question that I had for you today was, would you be interested in having more meal plan content on the blog? And if you are you looking for gluten-free meals, dairy-free meals, low carb, or maybe just simple homemade food that doesn't take very long to make? Let me know what would be most useful to you in the comments below. So this first meal that I'm making is chicken, leek and spinach pasta. So I'm going to be putting my recipe up on the blog, but it won't be up for a couple of weeks. So I've included in my blog post that goes along with this video a recipe that's very similar. I'm starting by finely chopping 4 medium leeks that I'm going to leave to fry for about 5 minutes until they're slightly softened. Then I'm adding 300 milliliters of chicken stock, some salt, and I will add some spinach and some cooked chicken to this. So the weekend before I made this dish, I'd actually cooked 2 roast chickens. Now, one of the roast chickens we ate for Sunday lunch, and the other one I took all of the meat off the carcass to use it in this dish. Now, the reason why I like to do this is, first of all, it's a lot easier to cook whole chickens once in the week and then be able to use the cooked meat afterwards, because it saves a lot of time. I don't have to be chopping up chicken breasts and frying them before I can do the vegetables. So I like to do it this way. I find that meat is tastier. I prefer the texture, and it's actually a lot cheaper to do it that way too. So that's what I did this week. However, you can use chicken breasts. You just need to fry them before you add any of the vegetables. I'm using frozen spinach here because that's what I had to hand, but you can use fresh spinach, of course, and baby spinach would be really good in this too. I'm just going to let that cook down for probably 10 minutes or so while the pasta's cooking, and I will add the chicken now too so that it has time to thoroughly warm through. The other reason that I like to use pre-cooked whole chickens is because then I can use the carcass to make bone broth, and I usually do that about once a week, and I use it in lots of different recipes throughout the week. I found that the sauce was a little bit dry, so I'm going to add a little bit extra chicken bone broth here. And this dish is so easy to make. It literally comes together in just over the time that it takes to cook the pasta. As you can see, I just had to fry the leeks a little bit before I put the pasta on, and then it's all ready at the same time. Now, I have 2 children that are allergic to dairy, so I'm taking out some of this sauce before I add any cream. If you like, you can use coconut milk instead of cream, which gives a lighter flavour to this dish, but I had some cream that I needed to use up, so I'm just taking out the sauce with no cream in it for them. But because there's that chicken stock there, it's still a really good sauce. And I'm adding a couple of tablespoons of cream here. I would normally add more than this. I would normally probably add about 200 grams of cream for this amount of vegetables and meat, but I just had a little bit left that I needed to use up, so it's not as creamy as I would usually make it, but it was still really good. Now, when it comes to serving this dish, I have a little secret that just makes the flavors pop. So I obviously put the pasta in there. You can use gluten-free pasta if you are on a gluten-free diet, or else I usually serve it with rice for my children. You put the sauce on the top, make sure that there's plenty of meat and vegetables in each plate. And to finish this dish off, I'm going to grate some lemon rind on there, some lemon zest, and also some parmesan, and that mix of flavours, the leek, the spinach, the chicken, the lemon, and the parmesan, they go so well together, and it is a really, really tasty dish. This second dish of the week is a vegetarian one. It's called Shakshuka, and it's a Mediterranean, I think it's Mediterranean, maybe North African dish that is comprised of fried onions and peppers in a tomato sauce with some spices, and then you cook some eggs in there. And I really love this dish. It is light, it is tasty, and it is very good for you. So I'm just frying up some onions. I only had one pepper this day, unfortunately, so I'm adding the pepper that I did have, and to bulk it out a little bit more, I'm going to add some of that frozen spinach that I had yesterday. Now I have to say it is not as good with spinach as it is with more peppers, but sometimes you just have to roll with what you've got, and tonight was one of those times. In terms of seasoning, you need to add plenty of garlic. We love garlic and it is so good for you, so I don't hesitate to put plenty in there. And then some smoked paprika and some cumin. These spices are really what makes this dish so special, so make sure you put them in. They are amazing. When I add spices, I always like to give it a good stir and let it cook without adding any liquid, just for a minute or two, so that the spices can develop their flavours. And now I'm adding the tomato. This is tomato pulp, chopped tomatoes, and I always like to make sure that I buy a brand that has at least 98% tomatoes in there. If you look at the ingredients on canned tomatoes, you might be surprised. A lot of them only contain 60 or maybe 65% of tomatoes, and the rest is water. So I think it's a real shame to buy a can of water. I like to make sure there's plenty of tomatoes in there, and I really like this brand of Italian tomato that I've got here. I usually add a little bit of water in the bottom of each can just to swill it around to make sure that I've got all of the tomato out there, and it also helps to bulk out the liquid in the dish. I add salt, and then I'm just going to let that cook down for 30 minutes. I'm going to add this spinach here too, but again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend using spinach in this because I don't think it was as good as if I'd used more peppers. The original recipe for this calls for cooking the eggs in the sauce, which I usually do, but tonight there were 8 of us eating, so I needed to make a lot of eggs and I didn't think I'd have enough space in the pan for all of those eggs. So I'm poaching them in a separate pan, and it actually turned out really well. I managed to get a nice runny yolk. So I'm just going to walk you through this technique of poaching eggs, which is something I got from Alexandra's kitchen. So you bring a shallow pan of water to the boil, add a little bit of vinegar. When it's boiling, you turn the heat off. You add your eggs. Now you need to be careful. You need to break them very close to the water so that they don't break. Then you cover it and leave it for 5 minutes. And the method is the same if you're making one poached egg or 8 poached eggs. You just need to be quick when you're taking them out of the water if you're eating several. So I like to use this mesh spoon to take the poached egg out of there. I drain it on a clean tea towel, and then I just place it on top of the shakshuka or on top of the avocado toast or whatever you want to eat your poached egg with. And again, this recipe can be found in my blog post, But you can also get it in my budget cookbook, which contains 5 recipes for easy and cheap meals, and I will link to that in the description box below. Here in France, Wednesdays can be quite rushed because the children don't have school and they have lots of activities. So I like to make food that is either really quick that I can pull together in the evening or that slow cooks throughout the afternoon or even the whole day. And the other thing about Wednesdays here is our butcher's has a special offer on ground beef. So I always go and buy my ground beef in the morning, and we usually have spaghetti bolognese or lasagna, or I make a beef stroganoff with ground beef. We have that kind of thing on a Wednesday, and everybody enjoys it. But one of our favourite things to make with ground beef is this chili. So here I am pre-cooking the white beans and the black beans that are going to make that ground beef go a little bit further. And while they're cooking in the Instant Pot, so they will cook for 30 minutes in the Instant Pot, while they're cooking, I'm frying up the onions and the ground beef. I would normally use fresh onions in this recipe, but I was a little bit short of time, so since I had some frozen onions in the freezer, I decided to use those. You just brown off the onions, and when they're slightly brown and softened, you can add the meat and brown that meat off before adding the garlic and the spices. So you may notice that I don't generally fry the garlic with the onions because I find that it browns the garlic too quickly and it doesn't give it a good taste. I much prefer adding garlic when there's already plenty of other things in the pot so that the nice fresh garlic taste remains. I'll fry that off just for 30 seconds, a minute, something like that, before I add paprika, coriander, and cumin. As I said earlier, I like to fry off these spices just a little bit so that their flavors can develop. So I let them fry with the meat for a minute, and then I'm going to turn the heat off and wait until the beans are done before I can assemble the chili. Now that the beans are done, I'm going to strain them. I usually rinse them. I don't know if I can use the liquid of these beans or not. I need to find out really. I know that kidney beans you can't use the cooking liquid, but I'm not sure about black beans and these white beans. If you know, let me know in the comments. I'm putting them straight back in the Instant Pot, and I'm going to add the meat and the tomato and the bone broth and let that cook on slow cook. Oh, it was probably 6 hours, even maybe a little bit longer than that. Now, in the past, I've not been impressed with the slow cook function of the Instant Pot. But this time I took off the seal, which I think meant that there was more evaporation that happened and the flavours were a lot more concentrated this time. So maybe that's something to bear in mind when you're slow cooking with the Instant Pot. Take the seal off and see if you think that makes a difference. Now, one thing I really love about chili, and is especially good for our family that has some people with food allergies, is that you can put plenty of different toppings on the table and people can just help themselves to the toppings they prefer or the toppings that fit with their dietary needs. So I usually serve it with sauerkraut, avocado, cheddar cheese, some cream, maybe some fermented peppers, lots of different things. Tonight it was avocado, carrot salad, and cheddar. Again, I was just using what I had already in the cupboards. I didn't want to buy anything, especially for this dinner, so I'm using up what I've got. It was really tasty, and in fact, those carrots with the chili went really well, and everybody thoroughly enjoyed it. Okay, before we go into this next recipe, I wanted to show you this technique for cutting up butternut. You rock the butternut with the knife and it slices right through. You don't even need to press down. So next time you're preparing butternut, give it a go. It's a really good method and it's made my life a lot easier. I usually use a vegetable peeler to peel my butternut squash. It works pretty well, and again, it's a lot easier than trying to peel it with a knife. So, just a couple of tips if you want to eat more butternut. Those are two things that I do that really help. Now, this dish is a new favourite of mine. It is garlic and lemon roasted chicken on a bed of roasted vegetables. I've cut up some vegetables here into about 1 centimetre cubes. So I've got red peppers, onions, courgettes, butternut, carrots, and a few cherry tomatoes that I had left over in the fridge that I needed to use. I'm going to drizzle those generously with olive oil, sprinkle with salt, and then I'm going to get on with preparing the chicken. Here I've got, I think it's 6 or 7 chicken thighs. Now in France, the chicken thighs come with the drumstick and the thigh attached, so they're quite large portions of chicken. We usually have one per person. It weighs about 1.5 kilos total. I'm going to add 1/4 cup of olive oil, the juice of 2 lemons, and then it's as much garlic as you like. I think I added 3 or 4 cloves of garlic in there, and a couple of teaspoons of herbe de Provence, which is a very popular herb mixture that you get here in France, but I think you can also buy elsewhere. Of course, you need to salt the meat too, so a sprinkle of salt in there, and then I'm going to place the chicken thighs on top of the vegetables, and I'm going to roast this in the oven at 200 degrees Celsius for at least 40 minutes. Now, you do have to be careful with chicken. I always check the internal temperature with my food thermometer. It needs to be at 75 degrees Celsius to be fully cooked. This took 40 minutes on these baking trays. However, I made it again after this and I used a ceramic 9x13 baking dish, and it took longer to bake in that. I don't really know why, but it did take longer. So just be aware, if you're on these flat baking trays, then it'll probably be done in 40 minutes. If you're using a baking dish, then it will take a little bit longer. Before I put all of this in the oven, I drizzle over the top the remaining lemon juice and olive oil mixture, and it gives the chicken and the vegetables such a good flavour. It's really one of my new favourite meals, and I'm going to be making this very often. In fact, it'll be a new blog post up on the blog probably this week or maybe next week, so keep your eye out for that. Now we're on to the final meal of the week, which is another vegetarian meal, and it's a vegetable and lentil curry, which is based on my lentil and sweet potato curry, which you can find in my budget mini cookbook, which I will link below. And of course, you can get all the links to my recipes on my blog post that goes with this video. Basically, I'm frying up plenty of vegetables. I've got courgettes, butternut squash, peppers, onions, carrots in there. And then I add 300 grams of lentils, some spices, some chicken stock, so it's not entirely vegetarian. If I was making it for somebody that was on a vegetarian diet, I would use vegetable stock. I add some coconut milk and some tomatoes and some of my trusty frozen spinach. You cover this, bring it to the boil, and then leave it to simmer for 20 to 30 minutes or until the vegetables are cooked through. This is a very tasty, healthy dish that we all enjoyed. Now you might notice that I didn't put any chili powder in there. That's because my family doesn't really appreciate spice, or at least not everybody does. So those that like spice can add it afterwards in the form of Tabasco or something else. And I always just like to add coriander, ground cumin, some garam masala, which is actually a little bit spicy, so I have to be careful with that, and then turmeric. And it's just so flavorful, we don't really miss the chili in there at all. However, I do like to serve this chili with a yogurt side, and this is raita. I cut up some cucumber, very, very small chunks of cucumber, and then I'm going to add some of my homemade yogurt. If you're interested in finding out how to make yogurt yourself, I will link the video that I made on this up above and my blog post in the description box below. So you cut up this cucumber very small, add a few tablespoons of yogurt. When I was buying yogurt, it was about three small pots of yogurt that I put in there. And I would say that's the equivalent of 5 or 6 big tablespoons, heaped tablespoons of yogurt. I add about a half a teaspoon of salt, and I will sprinkle some paprika on there for a little bit of a decorative touch. Sometimes I like to serve this with something sweet, like a few slices of banana. Don't knock it until you've tried it, it is really good. Or some mango chutney, but I didn't have either of those tonight, so it was just curry, rice, and this delicious yogurt raita. Well, I hope you enjoyed following along with me today as I made food for my family of 6 for this week. I hope I gave you some ideas, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, leave me a comment below, and subscribe to the channel for more homemade food from scratch, allergy-friendly meal ideas, and lots of sourdough. And I'll see you next time. Bye!